Cruelty knows no bounds. Who could heartlessly tie a mother dog and her 3 puppies to the tracks? Amidst the cold and fear, can these tiny lives escape? This story will make you rethink love and courage. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. No more waiting. The story begins right now. The sun rose gently over the quiet fields of the Kansas, its golden rays casting long shadows across the countryside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and wildflowers. Birds chirped in the trees lining the dusty road, their melodies blending with the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was a peaceful start to what seemed like an ordinary day. But amidst this tranquility, a scene of despair unfolded on the railway tracks that stretched across the rolling plains. A golden retriever lay tied to the cold steel rails, her thin, emaciated body trembling with exhaustion. Her once lustrous coat was now dull and matted, clinging tightly to her ribs. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted around as if searching for salvation. Beside her, 3 tiny puppies huddled together, their fragile bodies shaking from cold and hunger. Their high-pitched cries broke the stillness of the morning, each whimper a plea for help. In the distance, the faint sound of a train's whistle cut through the air. The steel rails began to hum as the vibrations from the approaching locomotive grew stronger. The mother dog let out a mournful whine, her body straining against the ropes that bound her. The puppies, sensing the looming danger, clung to their mother, their tiny paws pressing into the dirt. Time seemed to slow as the train's whistle grew louder, a harbinger of impending disaster. Driving along the quiet road in his silver Toyota Camry, James Carter tapped the steering wheel lightly to the rhythm of a hymn playing on the radio. His mind wandered as he prepared for another day of teaching at the local high school. The car, with its neatly kept interior and a small wooden cross hanging from the rearview mirror, was a reflection of James's steady and disciplined life. At 50, James was the epitome of dedication. He was a beloved teacher, respected by colleagues, and adored by students for his passion and fairness. His lessons went beyond textbooks, often infused with wisdom drawn from his own life experiences and his unwavering faith in God. But despite his outward composure, James carried a quiet burden. 3 years ago, he had lost his wife Olivia to cancer. Her absence left a void that nothing seemed to fill, not even the comforting rituals of his faith. His daughter Sophia, only 12 at the time, had been thrust into the turbulent waters of adolescence without her mother's guidance. Now 15, Sophia had grown into a spirited teenager, her fiery independence often clashing with James's structured and principled approach to parenting. Their once close bond had been replaced by tension and misunderstandings, leaving James to wonder if he was doing enough, or perhaps too much. As his car rolled over the gentle curves of the countryside road, James's thoughts turned to Sophia. She had been distant lately, spending most of her time with friends who seemed to share her disdain for authority. He sighed deeply, whispering a quiet prayer. Lord, give me wisdom to guide her and patience to love her through these trying times. His prayer was interrupted by an unusual sound. A faint, high-pitched whimper carried on the wind. James frowned, his gaze shifting to the horizon. Slowing the car, he rolled down the window, letting the cool morning air rush in. The sound grew louder, sharper, tugging at his heart. As he rounded a bend in the road, his eyes locked onto a horrifying sight. There on the railway tracks just ahead lay the golden retriever and her puppies. The mother dog struggled weakly against the ropes binding her, her movements growing more frantic as the distant whistle of the train echoed louder. The puppies, too small to comprehend their predicament, cried helplessly beside her. James's heart leapt into his throat without hesitation. He slammed on the brakes, bringing his car to a screeching halt on the shoulder of the road. Throwing the door open, he sprinted toward the tracks. The train was now visible in the distance, its hulking frame barreling down the rails at terrifying speed. "Hang on," he called out, though the dogs couldn't understand. His feet pounded against the ground as he closed the distance, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The vibrations of the tracks grew stronger with each step, the metallic hum of the rails a cruel reminder of the ticking clock. Dropping to his knees beside the mother dog, James's hands worked frantically at the thick knots that bound her to the rails. The rope was old and coarse, digging into his palms as he struggled to loosen it. The train's whistle blared again. Closer now, its deafening roar sending a shiver down his spine. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth, his fingers trembling. The mother dog whimpered softly, her eyes locking onto his with a mix of fear and hope. Her puppies cried louder, their tiny bodies pressing against her as if begging her to protect them. James glanced over his shoulder. The train was no more than a few hundred feet away, its massive form bearing down on them like an unstoppable force. He whispered under his breath, "Lord, give me strength." With a final desperate tug, the knot gave way. The rope slackened and James pulled it free, his hands raw and burning. Scooping up the 3 puppies in his arms, he called out to the mother dog, "Come on, girl, let's go." The dog hesitated for a split second, her legs shaky and unsteady. Then, as if sensing the urgency, she rose and followed James as he bolted from the tracks. Just as the train thundered past, James dove onto the grassy embankment, the rush of wind and noise washing over him like a tidal wave. For a moment there was silence. James lay sprawled on the grass, his chest heaving as he clutched the squirming puppies to his chest. The mother dog collapsed beside him, her body trembling but alive. She let out a soft whimper, her nose nudging James's arm as if to say thank you. James exhaled deeply, his head falling back against the ground. Looking up at the sky, he whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." The train's rumble faded into the distance, leaving only the soft cries of the puppies and the steady rhythm of James's breathing. As he sat up, cradling the tiny lives he had just saved, he knew that this moment, this act of courage and compassion, would mark a turning point in his life and in the life of his family. The journey back home was quiet, save for the occasional whimpers of the puppies nestled in James's lap and the labored breaths of the golden retriever lying on the backseat of his car. James drove cautiously, his mind racing with a mix of relief and concern. He had saved their lives, but their frail condition made it clear that this was just the beginning. As the car pulled into the driveway of his modest home, James turned off the engine and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. His small Springfield, with its neatly trimmed lawn and flower beds, had always been a haven of routine and order. But today it felt different, charged with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. Opening the car door, James carefully carried the puppies into the backyard, where the shade of a sturdy oak tree provided a cool refuge. The mother dog followed weakly, her golden coat catching the afternoon sunlight as she limped behind him. Setting the puppies down on a soft patch of grass, James brought out bowls of water and the leftover chicken from the fridge. "Here you go," he said softly, placing the food and water in front of the mother dog. She hesitated at first, her wary eyes darting toward James before she cautiously lapped at the water. The puppies, too small to eat solids, nuzzled against their mother, seeking comfort. Inside the house, Sophia sat sprawled on the living room couch, earbuds in and her phone in hand. The muffled beat of a pop song played as she scrolled through her social media feed. Her auburn hair was tied up in a messy bun, and her expression carried the aloof indifference typical of teenagers her age. Hearing the front door open, she glanced up briefly as James walked in. His clothes were still dirt-streaked, and his expression looked more focused than usual. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What happened to you? Wrestling in the mud or something?" James hesitated, then decided it was better to involve her than to let her find out later. "I found some dogs," he said simply. Sophia pulled out one earbud, now mildly interested. "Dogs like strays?" "Something like that," James replied. "They were in trouble. I brought them home." This piqued Sophia's curiosity. She got up and followed her father to the backyard, where she stopped abruptly at the sight of the golden retriever and her puppies. "Whoa," she murmured, stepping closer. "Where did you find them?" "On the tracks," James said, his voice heavy. "They were tied up. Someone left them there to die." Sophia stiffened, her face betraying a flicker of something unreadable. She crouched down near the puppies, her fingers brushing lightly against their soft fur. "Who would do something like that?" James didn't answer, but he watched her closely. It was rare to see Sophia show such genuine interest in anything he said or did. For a moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of empathy in her usually guarded expression. Over the next few days, James devoted himself to nursing the dogs back to health. He cleaned the mother dog's wounds, fed her nutritious meals, and ensured the puppies were kept warm and safe. Sophia, though initially distant, began to linger in the backyard more often, watching her father work and occasionally helping with small tasks. She seemed especially drawn to one of the puppies, a tiny, timid creature with a soft whimper and soulful eyes. "Do they have names?" Sophia asked one evening as she stroked the puppy's head. "Not yet," James said, glancing up from where he was bandaging the mother dog's paw. "I figured we'd wait until they're settled before naming them." Sophia nodded, her gaze distant. For a brief moment, the usual tension between them seemed to dissipate, replaced by an unspoken understanding. But the fragile peace didn't last. A few days later, while James was cleaning the backyard, a neighbor stopped by. Mrs. Callahan, a kind but sharp-eyed woman, leaned over the fence with a frown. "James," she called, "you've been busy with those dogs, haven't you?" "Yes, ma'am," James replied, wiping his hands on a towel. "Why do you ask?" "Well," she said hesitantly, "I heard from some of the neighborhood kids about..." "What happened?" "They said the dogs got tied up on the tracks because they stole food from them. Sounded like some prank gone too far." James's heart sank. "Do you know who they were?" Mrs. Callahan hesitated, then sighed. "I don't like to point fingers, but your Sophia was mentioned. She's been hanging out with Ethan and Lily a lot lately. I think Daniel was involved too." James thanked her and returned to the backyard, his mind reeling. Could Sophia really have been part of such a cruel act? It didn't seem possible. And yet, as he thought about her recent behavior and her sudden interest in the dogs, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that Mrs. Callahan might be right. That evening after dinner, James decided to confront Sophia. She was in her room, scrolling through her phone as usual. "Sophia," he began, leaning against the doorframe. She glanced up, her expression guarded. "What's up?" "I need to ask you something," he said carefully. "Were you and your friends involved in what happened to those dogs?" Sophia froze, her face pale. For a moment, she looked as though she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped. "We didn't mean to hurt them," she muttered. James's heart ached at the admission. "Why, Sophia? Why would you do something like that?" "They stole food from us," Sophia said defensively. "We were just trying to scare them off. We didn't think." Her voice trailed off, guilt washing over her face. James closed his eyes, struggling to contain his frustration. He took a deep breath and said, "You tied them to a train track, Sophia. That's not a prank. That's cruelty." "I know," Sophia snapped, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't think it would go that far. It wasn't just me. It was Ethan's idea, okay?" James knelt in front of her, his voice softer now. "It doesn't matter whose idea it was. You were part of it, and now it's our job to make it right." Sophia looked away, wiping her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You're going to help me take care of those dogs," James said firmly. "And you're going to apologize to them in the only way that matters, by showing them kindness and responsibility." Sophia hesitated, then nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while, James saw a glimmer of the compassionate child he knew still existed beneath her tough exterior. Little did they know this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge both of them, reshaping their relationship and their understanding of compassion and forgiveness. The following day, James decided it was time to confront the truth. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. The neighbor's story, Sophia's confession, and the unspoken guilt in her eyes. But he knew this wasn't just about punishment, it was about understanding. James believed that every action, even one as cruel as this, came from a place that needed healing. By late afternoon, the backyard was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional whimper from the puppies. James sat on the porch, the dogs resting near his feet, as Sophia reluctantly approached with her 3 friends in tow. Ethan walked ahead, his usual cocky grin now replaced by an uneasy expression. Lily followed, her shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously. Daniel lagged behind, his face impassive, though the tension in his clenched fist betrayed his discomfort. "Thank you for coming," James said, his tone steady but firm. He gestured for them to sit on the porch steps. "We need to talk about what happened." Ethan was the first to speak, his voice defensive. "Look, we didn't mean to hurt them. It was just a prank." James interrupted, his voice sharper now. "You tied helpless animals to train tracks. Does that sound like a prank to you?" Ethan faltered, his gaze dropping to the ground. Beside him, Lily sniffled softly, wiping at her eyes with her sleeve. Daniel, arms crossed, remained silent, but his jaw tightened visibly. James continued, his voice softer but laced with conviction. "I'm not here to humiliate you or to make you feel worse than you already do, but I need to understand why you did it. Start from the beginning." Ethan hesitated before speaking, his usual bravado crumbling under James's steady gaze. "We were at the park," he mumbled. "We had some hot dogs and the big one," he motioned toward the mother dog. "She came out of nowhere and grabbed one. She looked hungry," Lily added quietly, her voice trembling. "But we were mad because we didn't have much food left and we thought—" She broke off, her face crumpling with guilt. Daniel finally spoke, his tone cold. "It was Ethan's idea to tie them up. I didn't want to, but I didn't stop him either." "Oh, come on," Ethan snapped, his voice rising. "You laughed about it. Don't act like you didn't think it was funny." "That's enough," James's voice cut through their argument, silencing the group. He exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. "You all made a mistake. A terrible, dangerous mistake. But the way forward isn't through blaming each other. It's through understanding what you've done and taking responsibility." The words hung in the air for a moment, the teens shifting uncomfortably under James's gaze. Sophia, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, her voice small. "I didn't think it would go that far. We just wanted to scare them." James turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of disappointment and compassion. "And what if I hadn't been there, Sophia? What if that train had come before anyone could stop it?" Sophia's face flushed, her eyes welling up with tears. "I didn't think—" "That's exactly the problem," James interrupted gently. "You didn't think? None of you did. But now you have to." He looked at each of them in turn, his voice steady. "I'm not going to punish you, but I am going to teach you. These dogs need care, patience, and kindness. Everything you failed to show them before. You're going to spend time with them, help me care for them, and learn what it means to take responsibility for a life other than your own." The teens looked at each other, uncertainty and guilt etched into their faces. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "What do you mean? Like, feed them or something?" "Feed them, clean up after them, walk them," James replied. "You'll be here every day until these dogs are healthy and ready to move on to better lives. That's how you'll make this right." Lily nodded almost immediately, tears still streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Daniel hesitated, his arms still crossed, but after a moment he gave a curt nod. "Fine." Ethan sighed heavily, rolling his eyes. "Whatever. I guess it's better than being grounded." Over the next few days, the transformation was slow but palpable. Ethan, initially reluctant and dismissive, began to show a surprising creativity. He crafted simple toys for the puppies out of tennis balls and old ropes, and though he pretended not to care, his face lit up each time one of the pups eagerly pounced on his creations. Lily, the quietest of the group, found solace in tending to the mother dog. She sat with her for hours, brushing her matted fur and speaking softly to her. The once nervous dog began to relax in Lily's presence, her tail wagging faintly each time the girl approached. Daniel, true to his reserved nature, bonded with the smallest and shyest of the puppies. He walked the pup around the yard, his gruff demeanor softening as the tiny creature looked up at him with trusting eyes. Sophia, meanwhile, surprised James the most. She threw herself into the work with an earnestness he hadn't seen in years. Whether feeding the dogs, cleaning their bedding, or simply sitting beside them in the quiet of the evening, she seemed to find a sense of purpose in the task. And though she didn't say it outright, James could see the guilt in her every action, a silent apology to both the dogs and to him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the backyard glowed with a warm golden light, James sat on the porch watching the teens interact with the dogs. Ethan was tossing a ball for one of the puppies, laughing as it clumsily chased after it. Lily sat cross-legged beside the mother dog, her hands gently stroking the animal's now glossy fur. Daniel leaned against a tree, the smallest puppy curled up at his feet, its tiny snores barely audible in the stillness. And Sophia, for the first time in years, looked content. James exhaled deeply, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The road to healing was just beginning, but he could see the seeds of change taking root. These children, once careless and thoughtless, were learning what it meant to care, to nurture, and to take responsibility for their actions. As he watched, James clasped the small wooden cross around his neck and whispered a quiet prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for guiding them, and for guiding me." Though the journey ahead would still have its challenges, James knew this was the turning point. Not just for the dogs, but for the teens and for his family. The mornings at James's home now began with the cheerful commotion of barking puppies and bustling teenagers. The backyard, once a quiet space dominated by the shade of an old oak tree, had transformed into a lively haven for the golden retriever and her 3 puppies. Each day, James gathered Sophia, Ethan, Lily, and Daniel for their responsibilities, carefully turning what could have been a chore into an opportunity for growth. "Today we're focusing on trust," James announced one morning as the group stood in a semicircle around the dogs. The mother dog, now named Goldie, watched them with cautious but growing confidence. Her puppies tumbled over each other, their boundless energy drawing chuckles from the teens. "What do you mean by trust?" Lily asked, her hand nervously stroking Goldie's head. James crouched down, meeting her gaze. "It means understanding what they need and showing them that they're safe with us. Goldie and her pups have been through a lot. Every gentle touch, every kind word, it helps them heal." Ethan smirked, twirling a tennis ball in his hand. "So basically, don't screw it up." "Something like that," James replied, raising an eyebrow but suppressing a smile. Over the days, the group settled into a rhythm. Ethan, initially aloof, began channeling his energy into making toys for the puppies. He scavenged old ropes and scraps of fabric from James's shed, fashioning them into makeshift tug toys. One afternoon, he proudly held up a braided rope toy. "Check it out," Ethan said, tossing the rope to one of the puppies. The little dog pounced on it, immediately tugging and growling with mock ferocity. Lily clapped her hands, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "That's amazing, Ethan." Ethan shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but the hint of a grin betrayed his pride. "Yeah, well, I figured they needed something to chew on besides my shoes." Lily, usually shy and hesitant, found her own confidence blossoming as she bonded with Goldie. Every afternoon, she brushed Goldie's coat, untangling the knots and cleaning away the grime of her previous hardships. Goldie's tail wagged each time Lily approached, a silent testament to the trust she had earned. One evening, Lily spoke up during their session, her voice quiet but steady. "I've never really been good at anything," she admitted, running the brush gently over Goldie's back. "But this feels right, like I'm actually helping." "You are," James said, his tone warm. "You're helping more than you know." Daniel, the most reserved of the group, initially kept to himself, his interactions with the dogs brief and cautious, but over time he gravitated toward the smallest puppy, a timid little one, with floppy ears and wide, curious eyes. The two formed a quiet bond, Daniel often taking the pup on walks around the yard away from the chaos of its siblings. "You've got a knack for the quiet ones," James observed one afternoon, as he watched Daniel crouch down to offer the puppy a treat. Daniel shrugged but didn't look away from the puppy. "I guess I get it, sometimes you just need space." James nodded, sensing the boy's unspoken struggles, and sometimes you just need someone to understand. Daniel glanced up, his expression softening. "Yeah, maybe." Amid all this, James and Sophia's relationship began to shift. Their interactions, once marked by tension and misunderstandings, grew easier as they worked side by side. James noticed the small changes, first Sophia staying behind to help clean up after the others left her, laughter ringing out as she played with the puppies, the way she occasionally looked at him with a mix of admiration and gratitude. One evening after the others had gone home, James and Sophia sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Goldie lay at their feet, her eyes half closed as one of the puppies nuzzled against her side. "You're good at this, you know," Sophia said, breaking the comfortable silence. James glanced at her, surprised. Good at what? Helping people, teaching. I guess just being there when it matters. James's heart swelled at her words, but he kept his tone light. "Well, it's my job, isn't it?" Sophia smiled faintly. Not everyone would take the time, especially with a bunch of messed up kids like us. "You're not messed up," James said firmly. "You're learning, we all are." As the days turned into weeks, the group began to function like a team, each member contributing in their own way. Ethan's creative toys kept the puppies entertained. Lily's gentle care helped Goldie regain her strength, and Daniel's quiet presence soothed the most timid of the pups. Even Sophia, once distant and defiant, now took pride in her role, often taking the lead in organizing their tasks. Through their shared care for the dogs, they learned lessons far beyond the practical. They discovered patience in the wagging tails that greeted their efforts, forgiveness in Goldie's trusting gaze, and compassion in the small, furry lives that depended on them. And though none of them said it aloud, each of them carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing they were making amends, not just to the dogs, but to themselves and each other. For James, the transformation he witnessed was nothing short of miraculous. The once fractured group of teens was growing into individuals who cared, who tried, who learned. And as he watched Sophia laugh with her friends in the backyard, her walls slowly crumbling, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight bathed the yard in a golden glow, James clasped the cross around his neck and whispered a quiet prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for showing them and me the power of kindness." Though there was still much to do, James knew they were on the right path. This journey, born out of cruelty and mistake, had become one of redemption, compassion, and connection. A journey that was transforming not just the dogs, but everyone involved. The backyard was now a place of joy and healing. The golden retriever, Goldie, had regained her strength, her once dull coat now gleaming in the sunlight. Her 3 puppies, brimming with energy, dashed around the yard, tumbling over each other in playful abandon. The transformation was remarkable, a testament to the care and love they had received over the past few weeks. James stood by the fence, a small smile tugging at his lips as he watched the scene unfold. The teens were scattered across the yard, each immersed in their tasks. Ethan was tossing a makeshift toy for one of the puppies, his laughter echoing in the air. Lily was gently brushing Goldie's coat, her voice soft as she hummed a tune. Daniel, ever the quiet one, sat cross-legged in the grass, the smallest puppy curled up in his lap. And Sophia, his daughter, who had once been distant and defiant, was crouched down playing with one of the pups, her smile bright and genuine. For the first time in years, James felt a sense of peace, but more importantly, he felt hope. That evening, after the teens had gone home, James and Sophia lingered in the backyard. Goldie lay at their feet, her head resting on James's shoe, while the puppies dozed in a pile nearby. The fading sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the quiet yard. "Dad," Sophia said suddenly, breaking the silence. James looked at her, surprised by the softness in her tone. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sophia hesitated, her gaze fixed on the ground. "I've been thinking about Mom, about everything she did for us." James's heart tightened at the mention of his late wife, Olivia. It wasn't often that Sophia brought her up, and when she did, it was usually in passing. "She was amazing," James said, his voice tinged with both warmth and sadness. "She had this way of making everyone feel special, like they mattered. She loved deeply, especially you." Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening. "I remember how she used to talk to me when I was scared. She always knew what to say." James smiled faintly, his mind flooding with memories. "She had a gift for that. I think about her every day, you know, especially when I look at you." "Me?" Sophia asked, her voice laced with disbelief. James reached out gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You remind me of her, the way you've cared for these dogs, the way you've stepped up. It's what she would have done. I'm proud of you, Sophia." Sophia's face softened, and for a moment, the walls she had built around herself seemed to crumble. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. The following days brought more opportunities for connection. James, seeing how Sophia had begun to open up, started sharing stories about Olivia, stories he had kept to himself for years. He told Sophia about the time Olivia had rescued a stray cat from a storm, how she had nursed it back to health and found it a loving home. He spoke of her compassion, her resilience, and the way she always found beauty in the simplest things. Sophia listened intently, her usual indifference replaced by a genuine curiosity. "I never knew she did all that," she said one evening as they sat on the porch. "There's a lot you didn't know," James replied gently. "I think I was so busy trying to keep everything together after she passed that I forgot to share those parts of her with you. I'm sorry for that." Sophia shook her head. "You don't have to apologize, Dad. You've done so much for me already." James smiled, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "We're a team, you and me, and I think your mom would be proud of how far we've come." Meanwhile, the bond between the teens and the dogs had deepened significantly. Ethan, who once approached everything with a smirk and a shrug, now showed remarkable creativity and initiative. He began crafting intricate toys for the puppies, each design more thoughtful than the last. "They deserve something fun," he said one afternoon, his tone surprisingly earnest. Lily, who had always been shy and unsure of herself, now exuded confidence. Her gentle care had transformed Goldie into a vibrant, trusting dog, and the experience had clearly transformed Lily as well. "I feel like I'm finally good at something," she admitted to James one day. Daniel, once reserved and distant, had formed an unbreakable bond with the smallest puppy. He named the pup Scout, and the two were nearly inseparable. "He gets me," Daniel said simply, as if that explained everything, and in a way, it did. One evening, after another full day of play and care, James and Sophia sat together on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. The images of Olivia brought smiles and tears in equal measure, but for the first time, the memories felt more like a celebration of her life than a reminder of her loss. "You know," James said, his voice thoughtful, "your mom used to say that love isn't just about what you feel, it's about what you do, how you show up, even when it's hard." Sophia nodded, her gaze lingering on a photo of Olivia holding her as a baby. "I think I get that now," she said softly. James looked at her, his heart full. "I think you do too." As the weeks went on, the changes in Sophia were undeniable. She was no longer the distant, rebellious teenager who kept her father at arm's length. She had grown into someone who cared deeply, who took responsibility, and who embraced the lessons of kindness and compassion. James knew the journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges, still be moments of frustration and misunderstanding. But for now, as they sat together surrounded by the warmth of their home and the love of their furry companions, he felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known in years. The gap between them had begun to close, and in its place was something stronger, a bond built on understanding, love, and the legacy of a woman who had inspired them both. The backyard was bustling with excitement. Goldie lay under the oak tree, watching her puppies tumble over each other with wagging tails and playful barks. The teens were scattered around, each of them holding a leash and nervously adjusting collars on the pups. Today was the day Ethan, Lily, and Daniel would be taking the puppies to their new homes. James stood at the porch, a smile of pride lighting up his face as he watched the scene. The transformation of the teens was as heartwarming as the recovery of the dogs. From the moment they'd agreed to take responsibility for the animals, they had grown into more thoughtful, compassionate individuals. "All right," James called, clapping his hands. "Everyone ready?" The teens nodded, though their excitement was tinged with bittersweet emotions. Over the weeks, each of them had grown attached to the puppy they had spent the most time with. Saying goodbye to the rest of the litter, even while taking one home, felt like parting with family. Ethan was the first to step forward, crouching down to pick up the largest puppy, a boisterous ball of energy with a wagging tail and sharp eyes. "This guy is coming with me," Ethan declared with a grin. "His name's Rocket." "Fits, doesn't it?" The puppy barked in agreement, squirming in Ethan's arms as if eager to explore his new home. Ethan laughed, adjusting the pup in his arms. The once arrogant teenager now looked genuinely excited and proud to take on this new responsibility. "Rocket's going to keep you busy," James said, chuckling, "but I think you're up for the challenge." Yeah, Ethan replied, his voice steady. I think I am. Next was Lily, who knelt beside a gentle, doe-eyed puppy. This pup had a quieter demeanor, often sticking close to Lily during their playtime. She adjusted the pink collar around its neck, her hands trembling slightly with nervous excitement. I'm calling her Bella, Lily said softly, stroking the puppy's head. She's sweet and kind, like she deserves a pretty name. James smiled. Bella's lucky to have you, Lily. You've got a gift for bringing out the best in others. Lily blushed, but her smile was bright as she lifted Bella into her arms. For someone who had once doubted her abilities, this moment felt like a declaration of confidence and love. Daniel stood apart, cradling the smallest puppy in his arms. The pup, now named Scout, had grown significantly under Daniel's quiet care, but still retained its shy, cautious nature. Daniel had always been gentle with Scout, understanding the little dog's need for patience and reassurance. I think Scout's going to like it at my place, Daniel said, glancing at James. We've got a big yard and it's quiet. James nodded, sensing the deeper connection between Daniel and Scout. He's going to thrive with you, Daniel, and I think you'll thrive with him too. Daniel's expression softened as he scratched Scout behind the ears. Yeah, maybe we'll figure things out together. As the teens prepared to leave with their new companions, James felt a pang of pride and sadness. These young people, who had once acted thoughtlessly, had grown into responsible and caring individuals. Their bond with the puppies had been transformative, not just for the dogs, but for themselves. Before they left, James gathered them in the yard. Goldie stood beside him, her golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. I want to say something before you all go, James began, his voice steady but full of emotion. What you've done for these dogs and for yourselves is remarkable. You've shown that people can change, that mistakes can be mended with kindness and effort. I hope you carry that with you wherever life takes you. The teens nodded, their eyes reflecting the weight of his words. One by one, they thanked him, their gratitude sincere and heartfelt. Then, with their puppies in tow, they headed off to begin this new chapter in their lives. As the yard grew quiet again, James turned to Sophia, who stood silently beside him. You okay? He asked gently. Sophia nodded, her gaze fixed on Goldie. Yeah, it's just weird. The puppies are gone, but it feels right. It does, James agreed. He crouched down to scratch Goldie behind the ears. And Goldie's staying right here with us. Sophia smiled, her face lighting up. She's part of the family now, huh? She always was, James replied. She's just making it official. The days that followed were quieter but filled with a new sense of purpose. Goldie, now fully healthy, settled into her role as both a companion and a reminder of the journey they had all taken. Sophia took pride in caring for her, often taking her on walks or curling up with her on the porch in the evenings. For James, this new chapter marked a turning point in his relationship with Sophia. The distance that had once defined their bond had been replaced by shared moments of warmth and understanding. Goldie had become more than a dog. She was a bridge that had brought them closer together. Occasionally, Ethan, Lily, and Daniel would stop by with their puppies, sharing stories of their antics and growth. Each visit was filled with laughter and a sense of camaraderie that had once seemed impossible. As James watched the teens interact, their newfound maturity shining through, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What had started as a tragedy had become a story of redemption, love, and the power of second chances. Goldie nudged his hand, her tail wagging gently. James smiled, kneeling beside her. You're a part of all this, you know, he murmured. You brought us together. Goldie's eyes met his, her gaze steady and filled with trust. In that moment, James knew that though life would continue to bring its challenges, they had found something precious. A new beginning rooted in kindness, responsibility, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the small table where James and Sophia sat. Goldie lay at their feet, her golden coat gleaming in the soft light. A peaceful rhythm had settled into their lives, one shaped by the quiet joys of caring for one another and the unspoken gratitude for how far they had come. Sophia poured herself a second cup of coffee, a habit she'd picked up from her father, and glanced at Goldie. She's really ours now, isn't she? She said with a smile. James looked up from the newspaper, his eyes twinkling. She's always been ours. We just needed to figure it out. Goldie let out a soft bark, as if agreeing, her tail wagging lazily against the floor. Sophia reached down to scratch behind her ears, a gesture that had become second nature. I think she knows she's home, Sophia said softly. James nodded, setting the paper aside. And I think we found our way home too. Though the puppies had moved on to their new families, they were never far from James and Sophia's hearts. Ethan, Lily, and Daniel had kept their promise to stay in touch, and the bond forged through their shared care for the dogs remained strong. One sunny afternoon, the backyard was once again alive with laughter as the teens visited with their puppies. Rocket darted around the yard, a blur of energy, as Ethan tossed a ball for him. Bella sat calmly beside Lily, her gentle demeanor unchanged, while Scout trotted after Daniel, still shy but more confident with every step. They've grown so much, Sophia said, watching the playful chaos unfold. They have, James agreed, and so have the kids. Ethan walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. Rocket's a handful, but I think he's teaching me patience, he said with a grin. Lily laughed, brushing Bella's fur. Bella's like my shadow now. She follows me everywhere. Daniel, standing nearby, added quietly, Scout's different. Calmer, I guess. He's good for me. James smiled, his heart swelling with pride. You've all done an incredible job. Those pups are lucky to have you. As the day wore on, the teens and their dogs settled into the shade of the oak tree. Stories flowed easily, tales of Rocket's mischievous escapes, Bella's knack for finding the coziest spots, and Scout's newfound bravery. Sophia joined in, recounting Goldie's quirks and the way she'd become part of their family. For the first time in years, the sound of Sophia's laughter filled the air, and James couldn't help but marvel at the transformation in his daughter. He thought of Olivia, of how proud she would have been to see the woman Sophia was becoming. The ache of her absence was still there, but it was no longer a weight. It was a memory that brought warmth instead of pain. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded, the teens said their goodbyes, promising to return soon. Goldie and Sophia walked them to the gate, their presence a quiet reminder of the journey that had brought them together. After everyone had gone, James and Sophia sat on the porch, the quiet of the evening settling around them. Goldie lay at their feet, her breathing steady and content. Do you think Mom would be proud of us? Sophia asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. James turned to her, his expression tender. I know she would. She always believed in the power of love and kindness, and she'd be proud of how you've embraced those things. Sophia smiled, her eyes glistening. I think I'm starting to understand what she meant about how love isn't just something you feel. It's something you do. James reached over, placing a hand on hers. That's the most important lesson she taught me, and now you're teaching it to others. As the stars began to appear in the sky, James and Sophia sat in comfortable silence, their bond stronger than ever. Goldie stirred, her tail thumping softly against the porch as if to remind them of her presence. Do you think we'll keep hearing from Ethan, Lily, and Daniel? Sophia asked. James chuckled. If their stories about those pups are any indication, I think we'll be hearing from them for a long time. Sophia laughed, leaning back in her chair. Good. It feels nice to be part of something bigger. James nodded, his heart full. That's what life's about, Sophia. It's about the connections we make and the love we share. Those are the things that last. As the night deepened, James clasped the wooden cross around his neck, silently thanking God for the journey they had all taken. What had begun as an act of cruelty had transformed into a story of redemption, kindness, and love, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the bonds that connect us all. Goldie sighed contentedly at their feet, a golden thread woven through their lives, reminding them of the love that had brought them together and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Life often surprises us, weaving unexpected connections and lessons into our days. Through Goldie and her puppies, James, Sophia, Ethan, Lily, and Daniel discovered that love is more than just a feeling. It's an action. It's in the care we give, the forgiveness we offer, and the moments we choose to show kindness, even when it's difficult. Their journey teaches us that No matter how broken a bond may seem, with love, patience, and compassion, it can be rebuilt stronger than ever. James and Sophia's story reminds us of the beauty of second chances, not only for the dogs they saved, but for their relationships and their hearts. And in every step of their journey, the love and grace of God were present, guiding them to heal, grow, and strengthen the ties that bind us all. Goldie became more than a dog. She became a symbol of hope, a golden thread that brought together a father, a group of once wayward teens, and a community bound by compassion. God's love works in the same way, connecting us in ways we often don't see, teaching us to find joy in giving and to cherish the bonds we share. This story is not just about courage, it's a lesson in unconditional love and the power of forgiveness. Though it begins with an act of cruelty, through the journey of the characters, we witness a profound transformation that love can bring. The mother dog and her puppies are not merely victims, but the central figures that teach us the value of compassion and the power of redemption. This story teaches us not only how to save fragile lives, but also how to confront our mistakes and make amends. We all have the potential to change, to find light in the darkness, and that's the message this story seeks to convey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss out on more inspiring and meaningful stories like this one. Share and spread this message of love to everyone around you because love is the key to changing the world.